My dad always used to keep his important stuff here. See anything? Yeah, here it is. Huh? There's only $62,486.40 in here. What do you mean? Wasn't your dad supposed to have saved a lot of money since he didn't spend much? That's what I thought. Hey, Mom. Is this all the money Dad had? Hey, you too. What are you doing? Dad's gone, so I just came to get my inheritance. The sister, who had been cut off from the family after eloping with her husband, showed up on the day of our father's funeral and started rummaging through the house uninvited. It seems she came to claim her inheritance. Discussing inheritance on the day of the funeral is incredibly tactless. Even if one were to discuss inheritance, they should at least wait a bit longer. My mother and I were appalled by the actions of my former husband and sister, but my sister didn't care about us and kept pushing the conversation forward. The money in this bank isn't all Dad had, right? There's more, isn't there? Yes, there is. All things considered, it seems like there's about $400,000 in total. $400,000. That's a decent amount, isn't it? But wait. Mom, you're 78, right? Do you really need that much money? With this house and land, you should have plenty. Plus, you could sell the farmland if you need money, right? You don't need any more money. And you've got plenty of income, don't you? So, it wouldn't hurt if I got a little more, would it? I see. Then you can have the $6.40. Now, give us $400,000. My former husband and sister demanded the $400,000 inheritance from my father. They probably didn't expect to get the entire amount, but it was clear they intended to take as much money as they could. However, I had no intention of giving my dear father's money to these two. My mother seemed to agree. I hate to say it, but I don't think we have any money to give you. Inheritance rights aren't something that can be easily taken or forfeited. So, while my former husband and sister thought they were entitled to my father's money, when my mother told them the truth, they just looked at each other and fell silent. I'm Ashley. I'm 34 years old and work as a systems engineer. I married Michael, now called Mike, 8 years ago, and we live with our 7-year-old son, Ethan, and our 4-year-old son, Noah, making up a family of 4. We're a typical family, but I never imagined I'd be living this life until I met my husband. In my student days, being a science major, I was the type who focused solely on my studies and didn't have many friends. Wandering around the university looking for an empty classroom to eat lunch, or not knowing about sudden class cancellations because I had no friends to inform me, I experienced all the typical loner moves. After graduating and entering the workforce, opportunities to make friends became even scarcer. I would talk and have lunch with my colleagues, but we never met up in our private time. However, about a year into my job, I was suddenly invited to a group date because someone dropped out and they needed to fill the spot. I knew I was just there to make up the numbers and didn't expect to enjoy myself in a setting with strangers. But having never been on a group date, I decided to go just for the experience. That's where I met my husband. Are you a systems engineer too, Ashley? What kind of work do you do? Oh, I'm not too bright, so I probably won't understand even if you tell me. Why are you sitting all alone in this corner? Your drink is running low. Shall I order something for you? Sitting at the edge of the table, trying to blend into the background at a social gathering I was unaccustomed to, my husband, Mike, moved to sit next to me. It seemed he had no problem striking up conversations with anyone, regardless of gender, and it was my turn next. From my husband, who had no reservations about striking up conversations with strangers, I was bombarded with questions like rapid fire from a machine gun. Well, yes. I became completely socially awkward, stuttering and fumbling over my words. I thought he would find me boring and eventually move away, as most people do when they first meet me. But to my surprise, Mike kept talking to me. Listen, I used to be a bit of a troublemaker back in the day, even had a run-in with the police. But then, the owner of the auto shop where I work now took a chance on me. Since then, I've been studying and became a mechanic. Now, I'm aiming to get a certification that's a bit of a challenge. Wow, a mechanic's certification isn't easy, right? That's impressive. No, the one I'm aiming for now isn't that difficult to obtain. At first, I was a bit wary when I heard he had been in trouble with the police, but as we talked more, my impression of him changed dramatically because of his approachability and the fact that he had reformed and was working hard. Mike was able to openly share his negative aspects, like admitting he wasn't very smart or that he had been in trouble with the police, something most people would want to hide. This was something I couldn't do. If I had been able to expose my weaknesses like Mike, I probably wouldn't have spent my student years alone. My admiration for him went beyond mere interest to something close to respect, and I listened intently to him with a glass in hand. Just as I had never met anyone like Mike before, it seemed he had never met anyone like me either. Probably because people with high social skills like Mike usually hang out together, he had little interaction with someone as socially awkward as me. Our mutual interest led to us meeting after the group date, and as I went with the flow Mike created, we started dating and got married 3 years later when I was 26. It was surprising, even to me, that I, who had always been a loner, got married so quickly. My marriage surprised not only me but also my parents. "I thought you would never get married. Dealing with people isn't your strong suit, so it might be frustrating at times, but please take care of her." When Mike and I went to my parents to announce our engagement, my father, Tom, and my mother, Linda, threw some pointed jokes our way with a laugh. They usually don't say much, so it was probably their way of expressing their happiness. Despite their not-so-good control over their emotions, Mike, as usual with his high social skills, quickly warmed up to them. "Wow, I was so surprised by how big your house is. I was so nervous when I entered, I thought my heart would jump out of my mouth. You must have been through a lot." "Not really. Our family has always been farmers, so the fields and the house were passed down to us. We do the farming because we have to, and the house is just unnecessarily big and old. Yeah, there are a lot of families like us in the countryside." "Are you not planning on renovating or rebuilding the house?" "We don't like the hassle, really. We don't desire luxuries. So as long as we can live in the house, we think it's fine, and we only do the minimum repairs necessary. Both my father and mother really don't want much. They only drive a work truck, eat what's grown in the fields, buy work clothes, and don't travel because of the fields. It's surprising how little they spend. Mike works at a car dealership, so why not buy him a good car?" "Hey now, what are you saying? A car isn't something you can just buy easily." No. Ashley's right. We haven't spent much money up to now, so indulging a bit isn't a bad idea. Plus, if I buy a car from Mike, it'll boost his reputation at the shop, right?" "That's true, but it feels too much to buy a car just for that." "I can buy the car, and when I eventually stop using it, I can just give it to Mike and his family. Cars don't go to waste, so don't worry about it." What was supposed to be a simple visit to announce our marriage somehow turned into a discussion about buying a car. I think it was my father's way of showing his happiness about my marriage. But honestly, my parents really hadn't spent much money on themselves, so suggesting they indulge once in a while was genuine. The conversation might have strayed far from its original course, but the marriage went smoothly. The car my father bought from Mike became a hobby for him, and he started driving into town even when he had no particular reason to. He occasionally calls Mike to talk about cars, so it seems they have a good relationship. My mother, whom I thought would be troubled by my father going out by himself in the car, actually seemed happy since she could ask him to run errands, and she enjoyed the quiet with him out of the house. I hoped our life would continue without any problems, but there was one thing that worried me. Unfortunately, that worry did indeed come to disrupt my peaceful life. A year into our marriage, I was pregnant with our first son and had taken a leave from work. During a time when my belly was so big it was hard to move around, there was someone lounging lazily on our sofa. It was inevitable that I, pregnant and all, would get irritated with this person. "Hey, Sarah! It's fine if you come over, but you're lounging around too much. Who do you think is going to clean up after you leave?" Yes, I get it. When my husband and I started our married life, my sister, Sarah, who lived nearby, began to frequently visit our house. More accurately, she didn't come over to play but to laze around. Bringing snacks from the kitchen, she sprawls on the living room sofa, crunching on them while watching TV. It seems my sister, now called Sarah, thinks of our house as her own home. When I point it out, she lazily lifts herself from the sofa and starts wiping the table scattered with snack crumbs with a dishcloth. "I'm thirsty, bring me some water." It appears she has no intention of heeding my warning beyond the immediate moment. Furthermore, any admonition seems to vanish from her memory after just 3 steps, necessitating repeated reminders. Consequently, she seems to have completely forgotten my suggestion that she could get her own tea. Despite my pregnancy, I head to the kitchen to fetch water for Sarah. I've always been at her beck and call. I've always been pushed around by my sister since we were kids. I was the studious type since my student days, quite the opposite of my free-spirited sister. She is 2 years my senior, making her 29 and working as a retail clerk in an apparel shop during my pregnancy. She has continued to work at the store she joined as a part-timer during her university days. There's an incentive system at her workplace, and for someone as sociable as her, much like my husband, being a shop clerk seems to be the perfect job. She consistently performs well, apparently earning a decent salary. Moreover, her independence, beauty, and charming personality attract a lot of attention, so she seems in no rush to marry. This allows her the leisure to spend her days off lounging at our place. I'm home.
Welcome back!
Hearing my husband's voice at the entrance, Sarah loudly announces her presence from the living room, swiftly adjusting her posture on the sofa. Welcome, Sarah. Thanks for having me. You're about to have dinner, right? I'll be leaving then. You could stay for dinner. No, I wouldn't want to intrude on your time as a couple. As my husband enters the living room, Sarah quickly wraps up her greeting and leaves the house. Her polite demeanor and consideration seem like a stark contrast to the person who had been lounging on the sofa just moments before. Since she never shows her slothful side to my husband, his impression of her likely differs from mine. I've mentioned her behavior to him. But without witnessing it firsthand, he probably can't fully grasp the reality. However, her visits, though somewhat imposing, haven't caused any significant problems. So I've never felt the need to ask her to stop coming. 7 years have passed, and now our eldest son is 7, and we have a 4-year-old second son. Life has been largely unchanged and peaceful. The only difference might be the decreased frequency of Sarah's visits. It's been a while since Sarah stopped coming over so much. Now that you mention it, yeah. Why is that? Maybe because I went back to work? It's not like when I was on maternity leave or child-rearing leave, always at home, so our schedules don't match. You know, my days off are on weekends, and Sarah has her days off on weekdays like Mike. That makes sense. And we have the kids now, too. As I wipe down the dinner table, reminiscing about Sarah wiping up her own snack crumbs brings a sense of nostalgia, and I share these thoughts with my husband. While having her over can be bothersome, her absence feels lonely. Maybe it's time to invite her over for dinner again. I had thought her visits had decreased, but it turns out my sister's frequency of coming over hadn't really diminished. One day, while cleaning the bedroom, I found trash under the bed. Finding trash while cleaning wasn't strange, but the trash itself was peculiar. I didn't pick it up immediately, instead, I squatted down to observe it. It was unmistakably an empty condom wrapper. And moreover, it was a brand I had never seen before. My husband's days off are during the week, and I have weekends off. On weekdays, our eldest son is at school, and our youngest is at kindergarten, leaving my husband alone at home. I tried to think of various reasons for why it was there, but the only conclusion I could come to was that my husband was having an affair and bringing someone into our home. That night, I decided to confront my husband in the bedroom.
Hey, I found this under the bed. Are you bringing someone into our house?
Isn't that one we used?
We've never used this brand, have we?
Is that so? I don't remember. I don't pay attention to the design. His way of making excuses almost confirmed it for me. I couldn't sleep in the same bed as my husband who was having an affair, so I decided to sleep on the living room sofa. The next day, on my way home from work, I called my sister to talk about my husband. I thought she, with her high communication skills and rich experience in relationships, could give me good advice. However, what she said on the phone was completely unexpected.
What do you think? Since you can't hide it anymore, why not just admit it?
So, Mike didn't admit to the affair, huh? Sorry, the other person is me.
What? What did you just say?
I couldn't believe what I heard and asked her to repeat it. Mike's affair partner is me. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Shocked by my sister's revelation, I was so confused I ended up hanging up the phone. My head went blank, my heart was pounding loudly, and although I could feel blood coursing through my veins, my body felt cold. I didn't have the courage to call her back and hear more. So, I decided to go home first and talk to my husband. Mike, are you home? There's something important we need to talk about. Welcome back. I got home before you. The kids are in their rooms. Let's talk. When I went to the living room, there they were, my husband and sister. There were divorce papers on the table. Even without talking, I could understand the situation. So, my sister is your affair partner, and you're planning to divorce me and marry her? Yeah, you caught on quickly. It's been going on for about 3 years since shortly after Noah was born. We're thinking of getting married soon. I'm sorry, but can you agree to the divorce?
There's no choice but to divorce, right? Knowing about you two, things can't go on as before.
So, you'll agree to the divorce? That's a relief. I was worried it might get messy. See, I told you it would be okay. She's not the type to make a fuss or have the courage to argue. Confronted with their betrayal, I was left to navigate the aftermath of their decision and the impending end of my marriage. To not have realized their affair for 3 years made me feel incredibly foolish. However, unlike me, both of them likely had more experience in relationships, and my sister knew my personality well, while my husband was familiar with my daily routines. It would have been easy for them to hide their affair with their combined efforts. Likely, the trash under the bed was deliberately placed by my sister to create this situation. Given that my husband initially denied the affair and now appeared relieved, I think he wasn't informed about this plan. My sister, perhaps growing impatient about moving towards marriage, must have acted alone. As someone socially awkward, I couldn't immediately think of any retaliatory words against them. Facing them, I could only feel anger. Here, just sign this. Handing me the divorce papers, seeing I was at a loss for words. Unable to respond, tears nearly spilled from my eyes. Not wanting them to see me cry, I snatched the divorce papers and quickly left the house. The divorce with my husband was finalized shortly after. I decided to take our children and return to my parents' house.
What? Mike did? How could he? That Sarah, what was she thinking?
Understandably, my parents were furious upon hearing the situation. We're really sorry it's come to this. But, we're serious about each other. My father confronted them angrily, but it seemed to have no effect. Their determination appeared solid, but given it's them, it could all be an act just to calm the situation. Even if they were serious, an affair is still an affair. My father, realizing their lack of sincerity, decided to cut ties with my sister. And he returned the car bought during my marriage to my ex-husband. This act was likely meant as a severance, ensuring they wouldn't rely on us if they faced hardships in the future. My ex-husband and sister seemed pleased with their unexpected gain and kept their promise to stay away from us, never showing up or contacting us again. I moved back home and began living with my children there. Since commuting to work from my parents' house wasn't feasible, I decided to look for a new job. The new job was about an hour and a half's drive from home, which was quite challenging. Balancing my job as a systems engineer and childcare was tough, so I had to rely on my parents for help, making my inconvenience seem minor in comparison.
Mom, is dinner good?
I picked the eggplants. I picked these bell peppers. I was worried about how the divorce would change the children's lives, but that concern seemed unfounded. The kids got along well with their grandparents and enjoyed helping with the gardening. My parents appreciated the help with their work, too. Despite the major upheaval caused by my ex-husband and sister's betrayal, it seemed I had managed to regain a peaceful life. This tranquility lasted for 15 years until my father passed away at 80, which prompted those two to disrupt our peace once again. My sister didn't show up at the funeral. That was fine since we had cut ties. However, when we returned home after the service, my ex-husband and sister were waiting in front of the house. You're finally back. We've been waiting for you. I'm tired of standing. Let us in. They were dressed casually, not at all like they were there for a funeral. Smirking, they approached my mother and me. I had a bad feeling about this. We reluctantly let my ex-husband and sister into the house. It's been a while since I've been back. 15 years, right? This way, Mike. As they entered, my sister confidently walked deeper into the house, with my ex-husband following behind. Regretting letting them in, my mother and I followed them. Dad always kept important things here. Found anything? Yeah. Huh? There's only $62,486.40 in here.
What do you mean? Wasn't your dad supposed to have saved a lot because he didn't spend much? That's what I thought. Hey, Mom. Is this all the money Dad had?
My ex-husband and sister were rummaging through my parents' bedroom, inspecting my father's bank statement. Though it was clear what they were up to, I needed to confirm.
Hey, both of you. What are you doing?
Dad's gone, so we just came to get our inheritance. My mother and I sighed simultaneously. The man checking the bank book bore no resemblance to the diligent worker he was 15 years ago. His appearance had changed completely, and his actions were utterly thoughtless. Inheritance talk on the day of the funeral is something the old you would never have done. He would have at least waited for a while. It seems the bad influence of my sister over the past 15 years brought back his reckless younger self. Moreover, my sister, desperate for money, continued the conversation without caring about our astonished reaction.
There's more money besides this bank book, right?
There has to be.
Yeah, all things considered, it seems like there's about $400,000 in total.
$400,000.
That much? Well, half to Mom, $200,000, and the rest split between Ashley and Sarah, so we get $100,000 each. Not a bad amount, right?
But wait.
Mom's 78, right? Does she really need that much money? With this house and land, she should be fine. Plus, selling the farmland if needed, right?
You don't need any more money.
And Ashley, you had a respectable job as a systems engineer, so you must have a good income now, right? So, it wouldn't hurt if I got a bit more, would it?
I see.
Then you can have the $6.40. Now, give us $400,000.
I've heard that anger is one of the strongest emotions. I'm feeling the truth of that now. Just moments ago, I was overwhelmed with sadness from my father's funeral, but now, that sadness is completely overshadowed by my anger towards my ex-husband and sister. They demand the $360,000 inheritance from my father. They probably didn't expect to get the entire amount, but it's clear they intended to take as much money as they could. However, I have no intention of giving my dear father's money to these two. My mother seems to agree.
I hate to say it, but I don't think we have any money to give you. What? What do you mean?
Although they managed to manipulate us 15 years ago, it seems we might be able to turn the tables on them this time. Hearing my mother's words, my ex-husband and sister exchanged looks. After a few seconds of silence, their laughter broke the tension.
What's that? You're saying I don't have the right to inherit Dad's money? Even if Sarah was disowned, she's still the eldest daughter of this house. You can't just deny her inheritance.
That's right.
Even if the will says not to give me a penny, I'll claim my legal share. Unfortunately, you can't just take away someone's inheritance rights that easily.
They're confident that we won't be able to deny them their share, smugly laughing. Indeed, Sarah is entitled to her legal share. Which means she could claim at least $100,000 from Dad's estate. The mandatory share supersedes the will. So, even if the will stated that my sister should not receive a single penny, if she couldn't accept that, she would be able to claim $100,000. And as my ex-husband mentioned, legally taking away or forcing her to forfeit her reserved share is incredibly difficult. But, my mother and I were already aware of that.
The will is yet to be probated, so we don't know exactly what Dad wrote. However, I don't think it states anywhere that Sarah shouldn't receive anything. If you want to claim your reserved share, you're welcome to do so. How do you plan to prevent me from getting any money, then? So, how do you plan to prevent me from getting any money? Don't be stubborn. $400,000, no, just give us $200,000. Just hand it over.
As their faces grow increasingly detestable, my mother seems to have reached her limit. It's time to confront them with the decisive truth we've held back.
Ethan and Noah have been adopted by Dad.
They exchanged glances, now silent, probably recalculating the financial implications in their heads. The two exchanged looks and then fell silent. Surely, they were frantically trying to make sense of the situation and recalculating the finances in their heads. Given their estrangement over the past 15 years, there were aspects they wouldn't understand, so I took over the explanation from my mother.
Ethan and Noah have always helped with Mom and Dad's farming since they came here. Ethan's graduating from college this year, but he's not looking for employment elsewhere. He plans to continue farming here. Noah, still a sophomore in college, intends to do the same after graduation. So, they're taking over the family business?
Exactly. It would have been cumbersome to inherit the land and money from mom and me and then pass it on to the kids, dealing with transfer rights, taxes, and so forth. So, a few years back, to allow the boys to inherit directly from Dad, Ethan and Noah became his adopted sons. We'll need to check the will for specifics about how the land is divided, though. Dad always disliked complicated matters. He thought this approach was straightforward and best. Ethan and Noah are set on becoming farmers, and since Ashley is divorced, adopting them doesn't change their last names or living situation. They agreed to it because it made no difference to their lives. They continue living with Ashley, their guardian. So, with 2 more children adopted, that's 4 kids splitting the $200,000, meaning $50,000 each, it's halved. Well, getting $50,000 is still something to be thankful for. My ex-husband tried to look on the bright side, the only impressive trait he retained. But we had no intention of giving them even that $50,000 without a hitch. Sarah, didn't Dad give you a car? A pretty good one at that. Wouldn't that count as an advancement on your inheritance? Faced with this question, they fell silent again, seemingly aware of the concept of advancements on inheritance. An advancement involves property or money given by the deceased prior to their death, considered part of the inheritance and deducted from the recipient's share. This includes the gift of a car. In other words, my sister can be considered to have received the car as an advance on her inheritance from our father, and the value of the car can be deducted from the inheritance she receives. The car Dad gave you was bought a year before we divorced, right? That was the car you suggested we buy new when it was time for the 3rd inspection of the car we had before getting married. How much was that car? New, it was about $60,000. And if sold after a year, how much would that be? Depreciating about 30% in a year, around $42,000. So, after deducting $42,000 from $50,000, you'd receive $8,000. $8,000? That's it? Though $8,000 is still significant. The shock of expecting $400,000 but only receiving $8,000 is understandably staggering. Hearing their share had dwindled to $8,000, my ex-husband and sister started to panic. Hey, can't we get at least $100,000? I mean, $50,000? Please, we really need the money. Why do you need it so badly? I worked in apparel, remember? You always bragged about good performance and decent pay. But after mid-30s, well, appearances change, right? My performance dropped, and so did my salary. I switched jobs but ended up part-time at a supermarket. So, relying on youth and looks without honing any skills, when it came time to change jobs, you couldn't find anything better. And Michael, you had skills, right? The boss found out about the remarriage, got angry, and I couldn't focus at work anymore. I was let go. Turning into someone so frivolous and thoughtless, I can imagine. After all the boss did to reform you, this was the outcome. No grounds to complain about being fired. So, I changed companies, but it seems my previous boss was quite generous with my salary. After switching, my pay dropped significantly. I have been paying child support, always struggling financially. So the child support payments stopped a few years ago because your incomes plummeted. That's why you came for Dad's inheritance. You were so knowledgeable about inheritance rights and advancements because you prepared in case we refused to give you anything. Sorry. If I continued paying child support, we couldn't afford our own living expenses. It's okay. I know that claiming unpaid child support is not easily resolved, and besides, once the boys become Dad's adopted children, you may no longer have to pay child support. My ex-husband and sister are losing spirit as they learned they would only receive $8,000. They had been hoping for a significant portion of Dad's estate. Dejected, they slumped, looking down at the floor. However, my sister began to harbor a growing resentment towards my ex-husband. It's your fault. What? If you had earned more, we wouldn't be in this situation. We wouldn't have had to come back here, ashamed. The lack of money is because you keep up appearances, spending on clothes and whatever else, just like when you were younger. If you managed your spending better, our lives would be a bit easier. You're blaming me? You lied about being expected to take over the company from the boss, making it seem like a sure thing. But it turned out you were just taking advantage of his kindness. You said you loved me regardless of my income. That was obviously a lie. I was deceived by your lies. What? Was it a lie? Then that means I was also deceived by your lie. Their argument descended into a childish squabble about who deceived whom. To me, they were both equally at fault. The children were nowhere in sight. Probably tending to the fields since they couldn't during the funeral. Before the kids returned, I decided it was time for my ex-husband and sister to leave. Take your argument back to your own home. Wait, please. Isn't there anything we can do about the money? $8,000 is too little. Can't we get at least $50,000? Silently, with my arms crossed, I just glared at them. Realizing persuasion was futile, they reluctantly left the house. This likely meant they wouldn't be coming around anymore. My ex-husband and sister ended up receiving only a small portion of my father's estate and had to continue with their lives as before. My ex-husband continues working as a mechanic in a small company, and my sister, though only part-time, is employed. They're getting by, but barely. A mechanic's average salary might be around $4,300 for someone with a vocational degree. But being over 50, my ex-husband probably earns around $5,500. Yet, I believe he's underpaid for his efforts. Living together, they're just scraping by, unable to save. Their lack of children might also be due to financial reasons. If my sister managed her spending better, they could live more comfortably, as my ex-husband suggested. However, she is at 51. Changing lifelong habits seems unlikely for my sister. Their current hardships might be manageable, but the real struggle will likely hit in 10 or 20 years when they're older. They're probably already anxious about the difficulties awaiting them in the not-too-distant future. I continue my work as a systems engineer. My eldest son is now a farmer after graduating college. And my younger son is in college but helping with the farming. The brothers are hardworking, young farmers, well-liked and supported by the surrounding community. With them doing so well, I have no worries for the kids. My mother and I watch over them with pride, assured in their future.